Good morning. Yeah. Moshe's got it. Thank you so much. Shkoyach. The other Moshe. We have a lot of excellent Moshes here. Thank you so much. Good morning, Rabotai. This is Rabbi Kalman Akiva Kovacs filling in for Rabbi Silber. Today's daf is Lamed Zayin, Laz. So Baruch Hashem, we are actually starting in the Gemara on Lamed Vav Amud Beis. We're going to have some sponsorships and a Mazel Tov. I was sent an updated sponsorship. We have a Talmud Torah sponsorship by Avraham and Shaindy Kelman in memory of our parents and recognition of the hard work of Rabbi Silber. Our Rav encourages our community and the internet listeners to learn Torah and midos in his own special, effective style. So true. May you go mechayil achayil ad meya ve'esrim. And a Daf Yomi sponsorship by Milton and Melanie Gertner. Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov. And you're here bright and early. On their daughter Shelley and her husband Bobby Dolitsky on the birth of a baby girl. And Refuah Shleim. Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov. Milt. Okay, Baruch Hashem, and Refuah Shlema also to Shoshana Tova Bas Mindel Leah and Tinuk Bat Shoshana Tova. Thank you to our sponsors, Mazel Tov to Milt. And we are at the Gemara on 36b, Lamed Vav Amud Beis. We're actually going to rewind a sec. We'll do the Mishnah, and then we'll launch in. The Mishnah said, Ein Ogdin et Lulav ele b'mino. Rav read this yesterday. So we bind the Lulav, we tie it together with the same species of the Lulav. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Meir Omer afilu bechutz b'meshicha. Rabbi Meir says, even with strings, even with something tied. Amar Rabbi Meir ma'isib on Yerushalayim. He says in Yerushalayim, shahayu ogdin eluvehim b'gimoniyot shel zahav. They had little threads of gold they would use to bind their lulav. Amru lo. They told Rabbi Meir, b'mino havu ogdino tomimata. So they had regular lulav derived binding underneath, and they put the gold on top. So very good. Let me check in with Zoom. Can everyone on Zoom hear us okay? Zoom? You guys are Zooming? I get a thumbs up. Shkoyach. Very good. So we are live all over the world. Baruch Hashem. So now the Gemara. Amar Rava. Afilu b'siv. So Rava says even with siv. Now Rashi here says, what's a siv? So glad you asked. It's an olira. An olira. Shegadol saviva dekel. It's something called olira that grows around the trunk of the palm tree, v'nichrach sviva, it wraps all around it, klulavi gefanim, like the vines of grapes. So that sounds a little strange. It sounds like it might be something else. Tosfos here in the medium lines, desivi kar dedikla. So he brings a kasha in Psachim. In Psachim, we had something the Gemara tries to explain over there what is valid for maror. And one of the things listed for maror is the charchabina, which the Gemara says is atzvota dedikla, something on the palm tree. And the Rashi over there in Psachim says that's siva dekel, shegadol sviva dekel. So Rashi over there says it's siva dekel, but over there in Psachim, we're talking about what's kosher for maror. So that must be zerayim, because maror comes from plants. And over here, we're going to see the siva dekel is an eitz. It's something from the tree itself. It's something from the palm tree. So Tosfos has a problem. He says, what do you mean? Siva dekel over there is a plant for maror. Over here, siva dekel is something to do with the palm tree. It's an etz. It's a kasha. So really, what is this siva dekel that Rashi's talking about here? If you look at palm trees closely, and sometimes you'll see these brown fibers, these like little hairs are coming out of the trunk, wrapping around the trunk. The siva dekel here that Rashi's talking about, it must be part of the tree. We're going to see later on. For Rabbi Yehuda, it has to be part of the tree. So siva dekel, these little brown hairs. So if you go down to South Carolina, you go to California, Israel, and you go inspect the palm trees, then you're going to see some of them have these sort of brown hairs growing out of the trunk itself. That's the siva dekel here. The Tosfos over there, he's talking, okay, over there, they're talking about something else. It's some sort of vine that wraps up the tree. You should know in general, this is a klal gadol in Shas, is that Rashi is localized. Rashi is contextual. Rashi is trying to help you figure out what does the sugya mean right here. Whereas Tosfos, in comparison, for Tosfos, kol hashas inyan echad. Tosfos is universal. So what the Balei Tosfot do is if there's some sort of contradiction in the Gemaras, in the Rashis, they're going to go and they're going to work it out. Whereas Rashi is just trying to help you understand what's going on right here. Not that Rashi would disagree with Tosfos, that kol shas inyan echad, but Rashi's trying to help you right now on this daf, and Tosfos is trying to help you understand and smooth out all the bumps in Shas generally. So it's two approaches to life, Sinai and Oker Harim. So that's just a general claw with Rashi and Tosfos. So the sieve is something here growing out of the tree we're going to see. Afilu be'ikra dedikla, and also the ikr dedikla. Now, ikr usually means roots. Here we're going to see it means trunks, because we're going to be making boards out of this. So it's the actual the wood of the palm tree itself, the hearts of palm. Okay, what bracha do we make on hearts of palm? Okay, anyone for shahakol, raise your hands. Hearts of palm. You guys eat hearts of palm? Leif tamar. Okay, hearts of palm. Anyone say shahakol? Okay, good. Anyone say adama? I got a lot of adamas in the back, like 10, 12 adamas. Eights. Who says eights on hearts of palm? Wow. I got one of these. Shkoyach. Someone is very brave. You should know it's a machlokis. It's a machlokis achronim. It's a machlokis OU and Star K. And the OU holds by Rav Belsky Zatzal, who said we say adama on the palm tree because it's not a fruit. The hearts of palm is from the middle of the tree. It's like the soft wood in the middle of the tree. So he says it's not the ikr fruit. It's not the dates of a palm tree. It's just the wood. It's the edible wood. So it's adama. Rabbi Heinemann Shlita says differently. He says the date palms that are planted for dates are a different species. Those aren't used for the hearts of palm at all. Those are used for the dates. You don't cut down a nice growing date tree for the hearts. The palm trees that are used for hearts of palm are planted davka to harvest the hearts of palm, and therefore, and not for dates at all. Therefore, those trees, you would say brei priya eights on those hearts of palm from those trees. So shkoyach to the dasi achid in the back. Shkoyach, who admitted that you hold by Star K. Star K says you can definitely say eights. If you said adama, definitely yotze. If you say adama like OU, Baruch Hashem, it works. If you say shahakol, we're going to go back. You can do a chazara and brachas. But if you say adama, it's good. Like Rabbi Belsky, like OU. If you say eights, it's good. Like Rabbi Heinemann. And since we're in Baltimore, you could definitely hold like Star K. It's sort of like minhag makom. Actually, I have a friend who asked Rabbi Heinemann when we moved to town. He said, "Is there a minhag makom?" Rabbi Heinemann says, well, Baltimore used to be pretty yucky, but not entirely. But then the Hasidim moved in, and there's no minhag makom anymore. So it's, so he was there's no minhag makom, but if you want to go like that, it's good. If you want to go like Adama, it's good. Eights is good. So Hearts of Palm is a big sugya, and we're going to see. It's Baruch Hashem. It's good. So good. We're already 7 minutes in. We've covered exactly one line of Gemara. So very good. Amar Rava, my time with the Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda, who says you need the same species to wrap your lulav? Kesavar lulav tzorich eged. He says the lulav requires the binding. It's not good enough to hold the sticks, to hold the hadassim ravot and your lulav together. You have to actually tie them together, so they're mamish together. If you bring something else, some sort of thread made of another plant, chava chamisha minei. So now you added a fifth element to this lulav, to your Hoshana bundle. And that's a problem. You only need 4. Amarava, mina la the sieve, the ikra the dikla, mina the lulavahu. So like we're saying before, how do you know this sieve, this vine-like growth, and the ikr, the trunk of the tree itself, are the same min as the lulav? You might have thought maybe you need mamish, the lulav leaves, the leaves itself to tie your lulav. No, you could even use some sort of thread or binding made from the trunk. Tanya, the Brisa says, Besukot teshvu. In Sukkot you will dwell. Sukkah shel kol devar. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda has an amazing shita. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ein sukkah nohaget ele bedalid minim shebelulav. Says your sukkah can only be made from the same species as your lulav. Rashi says he's referring to the schach. So both say your schach would have to be lulav, hadassim, aravot, etrogim. You could have etrog schach. Now a lot of people have etrog for decoration. If you have extra, that's nice, beautiful. Hang it off the schach. We saw the first parak. If it's bottled, it's close enough to the schach, not a problem, not an interruption. But Rabbi Yehuda says you have to have those as your schach. Adin noten, he brings a kal v'chomer. Rabbi Yehuda makes a kal v'chomer, a logical argument that it has to be so. Ma lulav she'ein noheg beleilot keviyamim. A lulav is only during the day. And really, we really bring it once in the day. Some people do before shul, during shul, during the Hallel. That's the only time we're really dealing with our lulav, not all day usually. And it's only during day. It has to be those 4 species. Sukkah, a sukkah, we have dinner in it, we sleep in it. It must be those 4 minim. Amru lo, they said back to Rabbi Yehuda, oh, you think that's a gishmaka kavachomer? They say, kol din shatadan tchilato lachachmer, when your beginning is a chumrah, oh, you have to use davka, these 4 species for your sukkah, sofa lahakel, but the ending is going to be mekel, it's going to actually cause a problem here. Eino din, not a valid kavachomer. Turning over to the top of Lamed Zayin, they explain, lo matzah arbat minim, what, a guy's trying to make a sukkah, and he doesn't have the arba minim. He lives in a climate where they don't have these things so much. Hey, yoshev a bottle, so you can't have a sukkah. Can't make a sukkah out of bamboo. A yid living in China, there's all this bamboo around, but there's not lulav. What's he going to do? He's not going to have a sukkah. But the Torah amra b'sukkah taishvu shivas yomim. The Torah tells you, live in a sukkah. Sukkah shall kol davar. So really the Chachamim say, your sukkah can be made of anything. And we saw, of course, in the first parak, it has to be gedule karka and not mekabel tuma, can't be kli. Thank you, Moshe. Shkoyach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvaro. Yeah. We could have Bruch Machayim Metim on the coffee without Shem Malchus, of course. So they say we can make your sukkah out of anything. V'ken be'Ezra. Also in Ezra. Now, of course, Ezra is sometimes really referring to Sefer Nehemiah. There's all sorts of reasonings. Maybe it was political back 2,400 years ago. Why Ezra and Nehemiah are sometimes lumped together, so we get the 24 books. And it's kind of the Ezra and Nehemiah, sort of that crossover between Nevi'im and Kesuvim. So the pasuk's really, if you look up in the Tanakh, it's really in Nehemiah, but they call it here Ezra. Ken be'Ezra Omer, what does Ezra tell the people? Tsa'u ahar, go out to the hills, heviu ole zayit, and bring back branches of the zayit, of course, is the olive. Ole eitz shemen, apparently is the pine tree. Ale hadas, our hadassim. Ale tamarim, that's our lulav. Ale eitz avot, and also our aravot. V'la'asot sukkot kekatuv, to make sukkot like the Torah tells you. So we see here that Ezra is telling them, you can bring pine trees and olive tree branches to make your sukkot. So we see it's not like Rabbi Yehuda. You could use other species. Rabbi Yehuda savar hani ledofnot. So those other species are not for the schach, but for the walls. Rabbi Yehuda would say you could use anything for the walls, but it has to be from the same arba minim for the schach. Of course, we know there's a famous medrash. We're all going to sit in a sukkah made of or leviatan. So or leviatan is definitely not, no one's ever shaking a leviatan during Hallel. But so Rabbi Yehuda would say that's kosher as long as you have the arba minim on the roof. But so he says ale tamarim, ale eitz avot l'schach. He says the other things are for the walls and the hadas and the tamarim, which is lulav, and the eitz avot is the schach. So it's done. But we have another proof that Rabbi Yehuda would hold that the trunk of the tree itself is valid for schach. We can make schach out of boards. Remember, this was famous sugya. How big are the boards before they cause a problem? Tivi Rabbi Yehuda, al masiv ve'ikra dedikla mina dilulavahu shmamina. So we see that the trunk, that this sieve, remember these hairs, these things coming out of the palm tree itself, that's part of the palm tree, and you could tie your lulav with it. And from the trunk itself, if you made some sort of binding or rope out of the wood itself of the lulav, that's valid, because he says you can make schach. He says you need the arba minim to make schach, and you can make schach out of boards. So what are these boards? They're palm tree boards. He cuts down a palm tree, scoops out the heart and eats it, eats the heart. And then he cuts the rest into boards and makes it for his sukkah. Shema, beautiful. Rabbi Yehuda really truly tell us your schach must be from the 4 species and not anything else. Hatanya, there's another brisa. Succah b'nesarim shel erez. What if he used boards of erez? Now, erez typically we translate as cedar. Erez bal vanon yizgeh. Sheyesh behen dal tefachim, and they are 4 tefachim. Divrei kol pesulin. So 4 tefachim is too big. That's already too big to make board schach. Ein behen dal tefachim, but less than that, Rabbi Meir poses. Rabbi Meir doesn't like these boards. He likes 3 tefachim boards. Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Yehuda says those boards are okay if they're less than 4 tefachim. Mode Rabbi Meir she'im yesh bein neser neser kimelo neser. If the gaps are the size of the boards, shemaniach psol b'neihem, you put other schach in between the boards. Kshay. Rabbi Meir allows these boards, but we're seeing that Rabbi Yehuda allows boards made of erez. My erez, the Gemara says, erez is actually hadas. So erez here, we thought it was cedar, but it's really a form of hadas, a species of hadas. Kid Rabba bar Rav Huna, to Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, Amar Bei Rav, Asora mine erazim. There's actually 10 subtypes of erez. So consult your local Orthodox botanist about this. But there's 10 meaning of erez. Shenemar, there's a pasuk in Yechezkel, in Yeshaya, sorry. There's a 10 b'midbar erez shita v'chadas v'eit shemin. Asim be'arava, be'rosh tidchar, ut asher yachtav. So that's 7 in the pasuk. They know from the surah 3 more. count as a razim. So this erez here is actually referring to a chadas. Rabbi Yehuda didn't object in that baraisa and say no, only 4 minim. So we see from Rabbi Yehuda, he says you have to have the dalid minim for your schach, but anything else could be the wall. So when we all sit together in Sukkah Shalaviatan, they'll probably put some lulavim in the corner for Rabbi Yehuda, and everyone else will be under the bamboo, something like this, just to make everyone feel comfortable. We can welcome everybody into the Sukkah Shalaviatan. Good. Rabbi Meir Omer Afilu b'Mashiach. Rabbi Meir says even with threads. Tanya Rabbi Meir Maisi b'Yakira Yerushalayim. So this, remember that, guys, the Mishnah we just read said Anshe Yerushalayim. It says Yakira Yerushalayim. We'll get back to that. Shahayu Ogdin at luluvehen begimonia shel zahav. They would wrap golden strings around their lulav. Amrulo, they said to Rabbi Meir, Misham Raya, is that any proof? B'minu haya Ogdin atul mamata. Underneath those gold threads, they used the siva dekel, or they used the leaves of the lulav, made threads out of it, and they wrapped it like that, and they put gold on top. I've actually seen the Maisa, a couple of Moroccan guys do this. It's not real gold. Maybe it is real gold. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what their bank account. I don't know what their Bitcoin's at, but maybe they're using real gold. But it's interesting to say Yakire Yerushalayim. Rashi says the Nichbadim Veshirim. So the most respected and wealthy Jews in Yerushalayim would honor their lulav with the golden strings. Now it's interesting. They were rich. They could have put these golden strings on their clothing to respect themselves, but no. They put their wealth on their lulav, on their item of mitzvah, to show that their wealth was not being used for themselves. Their own kavod was being used for the kavod of Shemaim, for the kavod of Hashem. And these were the most respected people in Yerushalayim. They were setting an example for everyone else. This is a reminder, when you want people to respect ruchniot, Torah and mitzvah, you have to respect it yourself. When you want your wife and children to have a kavod for coming to shul, you act mechubad in shul. When you want them to have kavod of Torah, you act dignified. When you're learning Torah, you show the chashivut, they show the chashivut. This reminds us, last week we had the king paying the toll. Remember the king paying the toll? Just last week, Rabbi said. And the servant's like, listen, all the money's yours. What do you want us to pay the toll? The king's going to pay the toll? He says, I'm setting an example. I'm leading through example. The only real leadership, the only real parenting is through example. And for the Yakir Yerushalayim, putting the gold in her lulav, it worked. How do we know it worked? It's a preview of coming attractions. There's a Gemara on Mem Aleph, Amud Beis. And the Gemara, it's story time. So it's beautiful. I just got to find the thing first. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer bar Tzadok Omer, Kach Chaya min Hogan shel Anshe Yerushalayim. So the Yakire Yerushalayim, the Nichbadim and the Ashirim, they would put gold strings. This is Anshe Yerushalayim. This is the regular men of Yerushalayim. Adam Yotzi Mebeto, Lulava Biyado. He'd get up in the morning, lulav in hand. Cholach lebeit knesset, Lulava Biyado. Korei kriyat shema mitpalo, lulavo biyado. Now, is he really holding his lulav during Shemona Esrei? Maybe not. You're only supposed to hold the siddur, medadin. Maybe he has his lulav close by. His lulav is always with him. Korei b'Torah, nosiat kapav, manicho agabe karka. So if he had to read from the Torah and he has to have the place, or he's a Kohen and he's duchening, he's saying Birkat Kohanim, then you have to put his lulav down. But then after shul, holech lebakir cholim, he goes to visit a sick person, nachem avelim, to console mourners. Lulav biyado, he's bringing his lulav with him. So he's bringing his lulav everywhere he goes. Nichnas the Beit Midrash, mishaga lulav biyad benai, biyad avda, biyad shlucha. If he had to go to learn Torah, which requires full concentration, then he would send his lulav home. Micah Mashmalan, what does this teach us? Lahodiacha kama hayuzrizin b'mitzvot. This shows us how zaris were in mitzvot. What do? We bring our lulav to shul, and we say halal, and we shake it, and we put it down, and we go away. These Anshe Yerushalayim, the men of Yerushalayim, had such a love for the lulav, they would bring it everywhere they went. Unless they're going to the base medrash, they had to have full concentration on their Daf Yomi. So then they send their lulav home, so they don't forget it, because they're concentrating on the Torah. But other than that, they're bringing their lulav everywhere, because they were following the example of the Yakire Yerushalayim, who loved their lulav so much they put gold threads, dafka, on their lulav and not on themselves. So again, if you're nichbad, if you're respected by other people, you set the example, and they follow the example. And we see that the Anshe Yerushalayim, Rizrizim, they learned from the Yakire Yerushalayim. Beautiful. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to follow the example of Yerushalayim. You find actually, if you read the halachot of the Ben Yehoyada, Ben Ish Chai, he often says, oh, in Yerushalayim they do this. He says, in Bavel we do this, but over in Yerushalayim they do that minhag, and that's beautiful. So often people look to Yerushalayim as a source for inspiration and education, elucidation, and it's a beautiful thing we should always be looking towards Yerushalayim. So Amar Lahu Rabba, we're back on Lamed Zayin now. The story time's over, guys. Amar Lahu Rabba, Lahanhu megodle Hoshana devei reish galusa. So Rava said to the people who were binding together the Hoshana, which is the greenery for Sukkot. And he told them, Shiari be beit yad, leave over a beit yad, a handle the size of a hand, so it'll be a tefach, ki heichi delot reve chatzitza, so your binding will be a chatzitza. So they're tying the hadassim ravot, the lulav together, and he says leave over an empty spot without tie, so you can put your hand there as a handle. Rava Amar kulanota eino chotzis. Rava says it's not necessary because if it's for noi, if this wrapping is a decoration, again the gold strings on top of the lulav strings, if it's decoration, eino chotzitz, it's not a chatzitza, so you wouldn't have to leave over a handle. Amar Rabba also says lo linkit inish hoshana besudra. Don't stuff your lulav into your hoshana, meaning into the rest of the species, the aravot and the hadassim. Diveina lekichatama. Sorry, inish hoshana besudara. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sudara is a scarf. Don't hold it with a scarf. Divina lekichatama. You need a lekichatama. You need a pure taking. You can't have a scarf in between your hand and your lulav. V'laika, you won't have this if you're holding it in a scarf. Rav Amar lekicha al yedei davar acher shma lekicha. He says grabbing it with something else is still called a lekicha. And he's going to get into this. Amar Rava, mina minallah, how do I know the lekicha al yedei davar acher shma lekicha, that grabbing an item with the scarf with something else still works as a valid lekicha? That's none. There's a Mishnah, the Azov. Who knows what an Azov is? Hyssop. Beautiful. What do we do with a hyssop? Yeah. We sprinkle the mei chatat to purify someone who was contaminated with a dead body exposure. We dip the hyssop into the mei chatat, the paraduma water, and we sprinkle it on them with the hyssop. So if you have an Azov kutzer, it's too short. It's too short to reach the mei chatat in the bottom of the tube. They keep the mei chatat in a little sealed vial, and you're dipping the hyssop in there. If your stem is not long enough, you need to expand it. So misafko bechuta v'chush. So you attach to it a thread or a spindle so you can reach the water in the bottom of your tube, the tovil, and you dip the hyssop into the tube with your extender, umale, and you bring it out, you hold the azov itself, not the extender, umaze, and you sprinkle the mechatat on the person who was contaminated. Amai, so how does that work? The lakach v'tavol amarachmana. The Torah says you take the azov and you dip it into the water. And you haven't done that because when you dipped it, you weren't holding the azov, you're holding the extender, your stem extender. So we learn from here, says Rava, that taking, using something else, using this azov stem extender, it's still a valid taking. Mimai, how does that approve? Dilma shiny chasa, maybe that's different. Kavan de chavre, because he's really permanently attached this extender, this thread or this spindle, he's permanently attached it to his hyssop stem. Kigufe dame. So now it's like the azov itself. So now it's like the hyssop itself because it's permanently attached. So now we could say it's buttal to the original azov. So it wouldn't be a proof that using this extender to dip into the tube is valid. Proves that lekicha davar acher is a lekicha. So elamechacha. So here's another proof. Nafel mishoferet l'shoketz. What's going on is Rashi explains the ashes from the paraduma. After you burn the paraduma, you would take the ashes over and you'd place them into the water. Because it sort of says, Mayim Chaim El Keli, you have to put the water in first. That would be possible if they just fell in. So the Rashi explains it needs kavana. What would they do is we try very hard during the paraduma process not to allow any chance of tuma. So they would make a basin by a rock already attached to the ground, and they would carve that out into a kli. So it's attached, it's like a kli, a basin to hold water, but it's attached to the ground. So then they put the water, the Mayim Chaim, into the stone basin, Mayim Chaim Lakeli, and then they'd put the ashes on top, and then they'd mix them in. But it requires a kavana. The Rashi says, Shalom b'kavan posel, ha-kiddush, deve'inan lakhu me'afar soifat achatat, v'natan. It needs lakicha and natina. It needs active awareness when you're putting the ashes in. Shehei lokech biyad v'natan. And it's mashma there, it needs to be biyad. So what if the whole thing falls in? Nafal shoferet, the shoket, and this shoferet is the one containing the ashes, not the one containing the mechatas. This is at the prior stage where we're actually being mekadesh the mechatas. We're mixing the ash with the water. If it just falls in, puzzle, top of base, ha hipilu, if he threw it in, hu kosher. So if he threw in he had some sort of receptacle or some sort of tube that contained the ashes from paraduma. If he threw it into the water, it would be kosher, is mashma. Only if it falls in its puzzle. Amai, v'lakhu v'natan. Amar Rachmana, the Torah says you have to take it, which is mashma, in your hand, and then place it, mashma, in your hand. So why does it work if you throw it into the tube? Elav shma mina lakicha al yedei davar acher shma lakicha. So Rava says we learn from here that taking al yedei something else is a taking, because the giving here, the giving the ashes into the water to prepare the mechatas, the paraduma liquid, is valid. Even if he didn't put the ash in his hand and then put it into the water, he threw the whole kli with the ash into the water. As long as he does it actively, so this lakicha al yedei acher uses the whole kli to put the ash in. That's valid, but it's something deeper than that, Rabosai. Ashes by themselves are practically worthless. I mean, paraduma ashes are the exception. Water is practically worthless. Okay, if you're not in the desert, I understand. Water is also practically worthless. You're taking two worthless things, ashes and water, combining them to make the most valuable liquid in the universe that can affect tahara, can decontaminate someone who had contact with a dead body. So there's another level to this. That's a beautiful concept, but we all have ashes in our lives. We all have things that have gone wrong and burnt up. And it could be we had inspiration and motivation. We were getting to the Daf Yomi on time every morning. We were waking up with zrizut. We had a fire. But maybe it burned out over the course of the year. A lot of things going on. We get tired. We get burnt out. It becomes ashes. So maybe we had something beautiful in our life, and it's burnt up. It's ashes. Now it's worthless. It's not whole anymore. It's only ashes. So what do? We have to take those ashes and combine them with water. What is water? It's wisdom, it's Torah, it's ruchniot. So we take the ashes, some things that went wrong in our lives, some things that in the past year we didn't work out, and now it's gone, it's worthless, it's ashes. It's not much, but we combine it again with our wisdom, with our inspiration, and it becomes something valuable. But we learn, even if it's done through a kli, it's still good, but it has to be done with dat, it has to be mindful. And sometimes it's very painful, Rabotai, to think about our failures. But it's Elul. Elul is time to turn it around. It's time to turn the ship around. And even though it's painful to think of your failures and think of what went wrong and what was a beautiful fire, but now it's only worthless ashes, but we have to be mindful of that. That's the deeper message here. Be mindful of what went wrong. Learn the lessons. Get the inspiration to combine those worthless ashes with our waters of life, our inspiration, our ruchniut, our wisdom, and now we have something valuable again, and we can use it to be mitahar ourselves in Elul, in the Yamim Naraim, and we can go on with purity and reinvigorate our lives with this new creation, that we've combined worthless ashes with worthless water into something that's very valuable, but it can only be done mindfully. It can only be done with our awareness and our intellectual wisdom to apply our failure to turn it around to our success in the coming year, God willing. So that's our wisdom out of the daf here. So he says the Rav has proved so therefore, if you had picked up your lulav with this holder, the little holder, it's got the aravos on one side and then the hadassim on one side, the lulav in the middle. So he says that's perfectly valid according to Rava. So beautiful. We can use those. Rava also says lodotz inish lulava b'hoshana. He says, lo ladutz inish lulav b'hoshana. Don't shove your lulav into your hoshana. Hoshana refers to the whole bundle with the hadassim and the aravos. The dilma maybe not shrei tarfe. You're going to push off some loose leaves. Some leaves are going to fall off your hoshana from the aravot and the hadassim. Have chatzitza. So now those loose leaves that are in the bundle are going to be a chatzitza. When you pick it up, you're going to have these leaves that are detached. It's a problem. Rava amar min b'mino eino chotzitz. So Rava says lakicha levi archer is not a problem, and he also says min b'mino is not a problem. It's still valid. Amar Rava, and Rava says lo ligas inish lulavo behoshana. Once you've bundled your hoshana together, don't cut the bottom of your lulav. If you find your lulav's too long, don't snip off the bottom. The mishtayir chutza, you're going to have leaves on the outside that are no longer attached to the middle, no longer attached to the tiomis, the shidra of the lulav, because he's cut off the bottom where all the leaves are together. So he has the leaves on the outside are still tied together, but now they're not attached to the lulav itself. Have chatzitza. So Rava says chatzitza. Rava amar min b'mino eino chatzitza. So Rava says that's not a chatzitza bichlal. The leaves of the lulav, even if they're detached from the shidra, would not be a chatzitza, it's min b'mino. You actually see the Sfardim don't use the holder, they take extra leaves of a lulav and tie them into a loop. So you're using the lulav leaves itself, not a chatzitza, it's min b'mino. You can mamish use the same leaves as your lulav to bind your hoshana, to bind all your minim together. Beautiful. Amar Rabba. So hold on. One thing first. This is going to remind us, this sugya, min b'mino eino chatzitz, and lakicha ali de avar acher, it reminds us of a famous Gemara in Pesachim. And if you remember, Pesachim wasn't that long ago. There was a whole, at the end of the fourth parak, there's a whole discussion about The Anshe Yericho did some good things, did some bad things. And these Kohanim Gedolim, some of them were great, and they ate 400 birds at once, and some of them were not so great. And there was a baskol that said, please come, so some of the Kohanim Gedolim, please come into the base of Mikdash and serve, and some it said, get out. And there was a famous Kohen Gadol who wore gloves. Remember this guy? Who remembers this guy? The Kohen Gadol wearing gloves. All right, story time. Here we go. I don't know if I'm going to put you guys to sleep or wake you guys up. It's beautiful. So this is Pesachim Nun Zayin, and it said, "V'od savcha tzu mikon Yisachar ish Kfar Barkai." It says, get out of the temple, Yisachar from Kfar Barkai. Why? Shemachabed Atzmo, he honored himself. Umechalo Kodesh Shemayim, but he was machalel the offerings, the holy things to heaven. Why? To have a karich yadei b'shirah. He would wrap his hands with silk. He would wear silk gloves to do the avoda, so he wouldn't get his hands dirty. Didn't want to get his hands dirty. Remember this guy? The Avi Devoda, he would wear gloves, he would wear silk gloves. What happened to him? Gemara explains all of it. It's an amazing story. Salko baby, so what actually happened to him? Amri Malka Melchasa, the king and the queen, famously, Havayatve Malka, Amr Gadia Yai. So the king says goats are yummier. Malchata Amra Imra Yai. She says, no, I like sheep meat better. Amra Man Mechech, who's going to prove who's right? Kohen Gadol. Let's ask the Kohen Gadol. He eats karbanos every day. He knows what's better, goats or sheep, because those are both using karbanos. Ata Ihu. So he came in front of the king and queen. He was a little bit haughty. Remember, this is the Kohen Gadol who wears his silk gloves to do the avodas. It doesn't get dirty. So he was a little bit of a, we call him an istidus, a little bit haughty, a little spoiled. He says, if goats were better, they should be the Talmid. Amar Malka. So the king says, he doesn't have any respect for the king. He's like scoffing at the king, waving his hands. Nifskali Yamina, cut off his right hand. Yahiv Shochad, he gave a bribe to the royal hand cutter. That would be a really strange job to have, to be the royal hand cutter. Paska Lismola, so he bribes the guy, he cut off the left instead of the right. Why? Because the avoda is only kosher with the right hand. He wanted to still do the avoda. Shama Malka, the king heard about this, Paska Limina, and had the royal hand cutter go back and do a 10-finger job on him. Amar Rav Yosef, Brich Rachmanas. Rav Yosef says an amazing thing. He says, blessed is Hashem, the Ashkalei Yisachar Ish Kfar Barkai, the Mitzvah Minei B'hai Oma. He says, he's blessed as Hashem who punished Yisachar in this world. He got his punishment in this world because really he gets Olam Haba. He was really mostly righteous except for this problem, and he got punished for this problem. Ravashi Yisachar Ish Kfar Barkai, Lo Tanab Siti, he didn't learn the Mishnah. That's not Rabbi Shimon Omer Kivasim Kavan Izim. He says, sheep are better than goats, become makom, so they go on there. But the problem with Yisachar was he was mechabed himself by wearing silk gloves during the voda. He wasn't mechabed the offering. He didn't want to get his hands dirty. So again, Tosfos, Lishitasa Tosfos here on Amud Aleph, he says it's different here. When we talk about picking up your lulav with a holder, with this woven holder, or with a scarf, if it helps you, he says if it's for kavod of the lulav, it's kavod of the item. And your homework is to look at this Tosfos, Deve'ina Lakicha Tama, Leika, on Amud Aleph. That's your homework for tonight before you fall asleep. So the Tosfos says if it's for the kavod of the lulav, for the kavod of the karbanos, if you needed some sort of fork or holder or something to pick up the karbanos, it wouldn't be a chatzitza. What's going on is he's wearing gloves to keep his hands clean. So that's a bizayon. Like the Gemara said in Succah, it's a bizayon l'kodesh shemayim, it's kavod for asmo. If it's for kavod of the item, for the kavod of the lulav, it makes the lulav beautiful, it makes it easier to hold the lulav, that's not a chatzitza. So if it's for the item itself, for the avoda, for the mitzvah itself, not going to be a chatzitza, but if it's for your own use to keep your hands clean, would be a chatzitza. So really, again, it depends on your mindfulness, on your intent. Am I trying to bring kavod for myself and keep my hands clean, or am I trying to bring kavod shemayim to hold my lulav in an easy and proper way so I can do the nanuim, I can do the avoda like Hashem wants. So that's the same action, but your intent does matter. Beautiful. Back to Amud Beis. Amar Rabba Hadas Shemitzvah Asur L'Riach Bo. The hadas in your hoshana that you're using for your lulav, you can't smell it. Etrog Shemitzvah Mutar L'Riach Bo. But the etrog, you can smell it. My time hadas L'Riach Kai. Hadas is normally used for smelling. Ka Akse Merecha Akse. When he makes it muksa, this is muksva lemitzvah. Remember our Hilchos Shabbos. If you set something aside for mitzvah, it's muksa. It's only set aside for the mitzvah. So since chadas is normally smelled, when you set it aside to the mitzvah, you're no longer able to smell it because the normal purpose is smelling it. This reminds us when Bar Yochai came out of the cave and they were setting things on fire and it was a problem. And then they saw this man running right before Shabbos with a hadassim. He had two hadassim. What do you need two for? He says, Shamar v'zachar. And they're like, he gets it. He gets it. So that was a hadas. That the hadas saved the world from the anger of Bar Yochai and his son coming out of the cave. So the hadassim are very important, you see. So when you set them aside for the mitzvah of your Hoshana, you can't smell it anymore. Etrog, dilachiakai, etrog, we eat them. Okay, some people do eat them, or you make them into liquor. That's also valid. Ki aksei, mechila aksei. So once you've set it aside for the mitzvah, you can't eat it, but you could still smell it. Now the Shulchan Aruch says there's actually a suffix if we should make the bracha during the holiday of Natan Reach Tov B'Perot. So the bracha on the smelling good fruit would be Natan Reach Tov B'Perot. It puts a good smell in the Perot. But Tosfos brings us Machlokes Rishonim if you're supposed to make that bracha during the Chag. So he says we shouldn't smell the etrog on the Chag. Now I see some very concerned faces. The Mishnah Berurah says that's only during the time you're doing the mitzvah. So when you're saying Hallel and you're holding your lulav and your esrog together, don't say the bracha and smell your esrog. But when you take it home and you're just hanging out in your sukkah, go ahead, make the bracha and smell the esrog, says the Mishnah Berurah. The hadas is muksa, smell. It's okay, you have an esrog. It's all right, you have an esrog to smell. I mean, okay, you could also use deodorant, but the hadas after the holiday is valid to smell. But during the holiday, it's muksa from smelling. And Rabbah goes on, V'amar Rabbah, hadas b'mechubar, mutter l'rechbo. A hadas attached to the ground is mutter to smell. Etrog b'mechubar, asur l'rechbo. But an etrog attached to the tree, it's asur to smell it. My time, why is this? Hadas el hareach kayi. A hadas is normally smelled. Like Bar Yochai, normally it's for fragrance. Isharit le, if we let you smell it when it's attached, lo ate lemigze. He's not going to come to pick it up. It's normal to bend over and smell a hadas when it's still attached to the ground. He's not going to come and cut it and take it home. Not a big deal. A lot of hadasim to go around. Etrog dilachiakai, but an etrog, you don't normally smell it. You normally eat it. Isharit le, if we let you go and smell it, ate lemigze, you might come and cut it. You might come and, Rashi, interestingly says, take a bite out of it. Taking a bite out of it would be considered cutting it. On Shabbos or Yontiv, would be considered a kotzer, even though taking a bite sounds like a strange way to do katsira. But listen, if you're hungry, and katsira gadol mizeh, says Rashi, if you're very hungry for this esrog, you might take a bite out of it, but it's still mechuber, that would count as a katsira, according to Rashi. So if we let you smell it, you might come to bite it, or detach it, or harvest it. So we're not going to let you do that when it's attached. So please don't use an attached esrog still on the tree to do your sehalo with. Amar Rabba, lulav biyamin, etrog bismol. He says, hold your lulav in your right hand. Your lulav here is not just your lulav, your hadasim ravot also. Etrog bismol. My time, what's the reason? Hanetlata mitzvot. So no, it's really one big mitzvah of dalid meaning, but there's three of them in that bundle. So hold it in your right hand. The right hand has chashivas. V'hai chada mitzvah, and the etrog is one mitzvah. You hold it in your small. Now, what if someone's left-handed? So it's a machlokes. So Shulchan Aruch says a left-handed person should, even though lefties have rights, we say the left-handed person should do the same as the right-handed person and hold his lulav in the right hand, because here it's not a din like tefillin. By tefillin it says yad kecha. We learned it should go on the weaker arm. So the tefillin of a right-handed person on the left, the tefillin of a left-handed person on the right. But here it's just because the right hand has a chshivas. The right hand is hesed. We learn al pi yasod, the yamincha Hashem, the riba koach. So the right hand has a chshivas even for a left-handed person. So here it's not a din like tefillin, so you should hold the species in your right hand if you are left-handed. However, there are some discussions, machlosim, about this. So if somebody does it in a left-handed fashion, we're not going to throw our esrogim at him. Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zrika, my tam lo meverchinan ele al netilat lulav. We say the bracha shekit sham mitzvotav etzivano al netilat lulav. We don't say al netilat arba minim. We don't say al netilat lulav ve'etrog v'hadasim v'ravot. Why not? Because it's the tallest. Okay. Why don't you raise your etrog up with your left hand, and then you're going to make the bracha on your etrog. Al netilat etrog levarech. Because in its min, as it's growing, the lulav is naturally taller than the rest of them. The other ones, okay, they're 2 tefachim, 3 tefachim. The lulav can be quite tall. So since it's naturally, the Tosfos says the shear is also bigger. You need we're about to see you need a longer shear for your lulav itself than the other minim. So you see, there's a chashivas to the larger item, and we usually call it a lulav. What do people normally call it? So he saw in the Shas they call it Hoshana also when you buy them together because you use Hoshana with it, but we call it a lulav. That's just what people call it. Call it lulav, and we make the bracha on the lulav. We hold the lulav in the right. The Mishnah says, Heichan hayu minanaim. Where do we do the shaking, the waving? Behodu Lashem, Tachila v'sof. In the first and last Hodu Lashem. Ube'ana Hashem Hoshiana. And in the Ana Hashem Hoshiana, Divrei Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai Omrim, Af Be'ana Hashem Hatzlichana. He says, even during the Hatzlichana, not just Hoshiana. Am Rabbi Kiva, Sofei Hayiti B'Rabban Gamliel Yeshua. He says, we were in shul, we were saying Hallel on Sukkot, and I was watching Rabban Gamliel and Yeshua, the Gedolim of the generation. Shekol Am Hayu Menanim et Luluvehen. Everyone was waving their lulavs, all over the place. Hem lo nanu ele be'ana Hashem Hoshiana. And they were only doing nanuim during Ana Hashem Hoshiana. That's when they were doing nanuim. There's a Tosfos here, and I got to sign this as homework also. This is very chashuv. We're going to say a couple things in the Tosfos outside. The Tosfos says, what's the reason of Beis Hillel? There's actually, so normally we would say Ana Hashem Hoshiana, Ana Hashem Hatzlichana, but why does he skip the Hatzlicha and only say Hoshia? Because there's a pasuk, Az Yerananu Atzei Hayar Milifnei Hashem Ki Valishpot Haaretz. So that's Yerananu Atzei Yar. Then the trees are shaking. And right after that it says Hodu Lashem Kitov Ki Lalam Chasto. So the Hodu Lashem Kitov, Beis Hillel says Az Yerananu Atzei Yar. It's put right next to each other in Tehillim and in Hallel. So we put them together. So beautiful. So the Beis Hillel has this reasoning, not like Beis Shammai. But then later on the Tosfos, he says this amazing thing. He says, Katan Yudei L'Na'aneya Chayav B'Lulav. We're going to find out. So he says the Na'anunim are not only during Hallel, they're also when you say the bracha. And some people have the custom, they will take their lulav first thing in the morning in their sukkah at home before they go to shul. Some Hasidim do this, some people do this, is they take it there, they say the bracha, and what do? Exactly, nanuim, they do the waving, they do the nanuim then. So we see the nanuim are not just linked to Hallel, but they're linked to the lulav itself. So even a katan who knows how to wave, the father can teach him how to wave. Even a katan who doesn't say Hallel does still make the bracha and wave the lulav. And Mesechet Brachot B'Sof Tfilat HaShachar, he says, Hiktim Letzeit L'derech, you get up very early to go on a trip during Chol HaMoed. Mevi'in lo shofar, it's okay, so apparently in Rosh Hashanah, you would blow the shofar early in the morning, even if he has to go somewhere. Lulav Menanea, you bring him the lulav during Chol HaMoed, and he should be Menanea, even though he's not at shul saying Hallel. Megillah V'Koreh, and you could bring him the Megillah, he'll read it first thing in the morning before he has to go on his trip for a mitzvah, of course. But mashma de menanea below Hallel, that you can do the na'anuim when you say the bracha without the Hallel. So even though the Mishnah is linking Hallel to when we do the shaking of the lulav, Tosfos said it's not totally linked. Even a katan who doesn't say Hallel, we still teach him how to do these na'anuim. They still have a chashivut intrinsically without Hallel. Good, so we'll start the Gemara a little bit. Nanua mandachar shmei. Who mentioned nanuim? I mean, what are we talking about? We have to wave our lulav. Where are we getting that from? Chatam kai. It's the first Mishnah in our parak. Kol lulav sheyesh bo shlosha tefachim kedei lananeya bo kasher. What's a kasher lulav? It needs at least 3 tefachim because it has to be enough to wave. So therefore, we have to wave it. So now the Mishnah is asking logically, when do we wave it? Kamar heichan menanim. So now we're saying, when do we wave the lulav? Tznan chatam. The Mishnah teaches shtei alechem. Shnei kivsei atzeret, the 2 breads of Shavuos and the 2 kivosim, the sheep of Atzeres. Ketzad, how do you do them? Because we wave them. The Torah has a mitzvah to wave these things. Maniach shtei alechem al gabei shtei kivosim. You put the breads on top of the sheep. Maniach yado tachtein. You put your hand under them. Umenif. And you wave it. Molich umevi, you put it out and bring it back. Male morid, and you bring it up and down. So apparently, either these are small sheep or large kohanim, because they're mamish, they're putting their hand under the sheep and over the bread, and they're going back and forth and up and down with this sheep and bread combination. So you see, you should have this is the source for a sandwich. You put the bread on top of the meat, and then you wave it, you eat it. It's an open-faced sandwich, also kosher, also good. So beautiful. Moivi Male Morid. So you go forward and back, up and down. Shnamar Asher Hunaf Asher Haram. That is waved and that is lifted. So Torah says you wave it, that's back and forth, and you lift it up and down. You bring it forward and backward for the one, for Hashem, that all the directions are his. So not just forward and backward, but also left and right. So now we see that we have 4 directions in the horizontal plane. Ma'alei Murid, and up and down, Lemisha Shemaim v'aretz Shalo, because Shemaim is Shemaim Hashem, Aretz Natan Livnei Adam. It's beautiful. Now we have all 6 directions. The Ma'arava, Matnuhachi, in Eretz Yisrael, they taught this. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Ukva, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Molich Mevi. Why do we bring it back and forth? Kedei la'atzor ruchot ra'ot. That we want to stop the bad winds. Ba'alei Murid, Kedei la'atzor tzlolim. Right, to stop bad dew. Dew can come from above, or dew condensation can come from below. So we go in all these directions to prevent poranot chas v'shalom from coming to the world. Amar Yossi bar Avin, we tell Rabbi Yossi bar Zavila Zota Mered. What does this tell us? Top of Lamed Ches, Shiari mitzvah me'akvina to poranot. The leftovers of the mitzvah is not the ikar mitzvah. The ikar mitzvah would just be to wave it. But to go in all 6 directions with these kavanot, that it will hold back the bad winds, that it's for Hashem, that the Shemaim and Aretz and all the directions are his. These Shari Mitzvah, these deeper kavanot, these kind of mystical actions we're doing with the lulav, they're Shari Mitzvah. They're not the real mitzvah itself, and a ma'akev, but it holds back paranot. So doing the mitzvah with all of these details and all of these kavanot and all these beautiful intentions can really help. That's what the Gemara is saying. It's not a segula if it's in the Gemara. Okay. So a lot of people believe in segula, and maybe not. I heard an interesting thing that there was a place that a rabbi went to, and the women were not dressed so tznius. And of course, it's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch to certain aspects of tzniut. It's mefurish halacha in Shulchan Aruch. So he told them it's a segula to avoid ayin hara to wear the long sleeves. And the women said, "Oh, it's a segula." They took it very seriously after that. The halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, maybe not, but a segula, they took very seriously. Sometimes the Gemara gives a segula, but if it's a segula in the Gemara, you know it's real. You know it's badukum and say, you know it's going to work if it's a segula in the Gemara. So having these kavanot for the Shari Mitzvah, it does work. So that's a good trick to have up your sleeve. It's a segula. Oh, segula. People take it very seriously. Shari Tanufa. Tanufa, this waving in all 6 directions, Shari Mitzvah, it's the leftovers of Mitzvah, the details of Mitzvah. Hiva, Utzeret, Ruchot, Slaim, Raim, and it holds back bad wind and bad dew. Amar Rava, Ken Belulav. We do with the lulav the same thing we do with the sheep and the bread of Atzeret, of Shvuot. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Maitele. So he would bring his lulav and he would kind of poke it and stab it forward. When he was waving, he wasn't just going like this. He was like mamish poking with his lulav, poking to all directions. Amar dain gira be'ene de sitna. This is my arrow in the eye of the satan. So he was very aggressive with his lulav, but the Gemara says, lav milsahi. Not recommended for everybody to do so. Mishum da'ate legrebe. You're going to bother the satan. If you start poking around with your lulav, say, arrow in the eye of the satan. Satan says, hey, wait a second. And he's going to, God forbid, make the lulav hit a wall or something, and then you're going to bend your tyomes, you're going to bend your tip, have a crooked tip. So don't play games with this. Okay, shkoyach rabosai. I got a couple minutes to put your tefillin on, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Shkoyach.